Welcome to the Siren Podcast. I'm Joe Carducci. I am very, very honored to be joined by three incredible people. I'm joined right now by my co-host of this episode, Joe Gallina, who you know is called Activism on every social media platform there is. And of course, my friend Majid Bedelin, who you know as Brooklyn Dad Defiant, also on pretty much every social media platform there is. And we are joined by Leader Hakeem Jeffries. It is our honor and privilege to have you, sir. Welcome to the Siren, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be with all three of you.
Great to be with you too, and thank you for showing up for work. So let's just jump right on into it. What is the state of the United States government at the moment?
Well, unfortunately, Donald Trump and Republicans have shut the government down, and it remains shut down because they'd rather sort of stay on vacation, which is what House Republicans have done. Donald Trump on the golf course, no conversations between Republicans and Democrats, even though we've repeatedly said we'll sit down with them anytime, any place, with any one of them to have a conversation so we can reopen the government, enact a spending agreement that actually makes sense for the American people as opposed to hurting the American people, and that, of course, decisively addresses the Republican healthcare crisis.
Leader Jeffries, I wanted to say that the last time I had the pleasure of interviewing you, we were in a completely different world. Trump was in office, but he had guardrails installed. Right now, so from the time that I've known you, I've seen you as that Obama anger translator, like the one from Key and Peele, always calm, cool, and collected. And then today, Mike Lawler got in your face at the House and words were exchanged. And for a moment there, I saw you square up and I was like, oh, snap, it's about to go down. And I know it was about the shutdown. Tensions are high right now. Can you give us a brief recap on what was supposed to happen did he ambush you or were you ready for him? What happened there?
Yeah, so House Democratic leadership, we just held a press conference demanding that Republicans show up for work, return from vacation, stop canceling votes, swear in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, and do something, most importantly, to address the Republican healthcare crisis that's devastating people all across the country. We've repeatedly made clear we're not voting for your partisan Republican spending bill because it continues to gut health care for the American people. It's now been voted down 6 times. And I'm thankful for, the partnership and the strength that continues to be shown with Leader Schumer and Senate Democrats. So we conclude this press conference, and I hear that Mike Lawler, who's a complete and total fraud, is waiting outside to step to me apparently, right, about the Affordable Care Act. And I'm like, this guy? So, I think some on my team would have probably preferred that I just ignore him. But I'm like, you know what? I'm not the one. Don't come for me unless I send for you. And I did not send for this malignant clown. And so we, had a conversation. But you're right. I haven't seen the video yet, but there was a moment that I think he thought he was confronting Beltway Hakeem, but he saw Brooklyn Hakeem. And it definitely took a lot of restraint for it not to go down any further than
We
it
need
did.
more Brooklyn Hakeem, sir. If I'm being honest, that's.
We should also say this. Brooklyn's in the house. We have Brooklyn and New Jersey here. Basically, this is, you've heard of the View. I think we could call this the Stoop, maybe, or so. Something like. But yeah, that was great. And at one point, you even said you told him to shut his mouth because he's in the middle, right after passing the biggest healthcare cut in history. They have the audacity to come to you and talk about the Affordable Care Act. It's just, it's beyond words.
It's unreal. This guy, of all people, who, as I pointed out, I told him to shut up basically because he was just talking over me. And at that point, he's just clearly not even trying to have a conversation. He's just trying to get his 15 minutes of fame because he's getting ready to go down in the election next year because we're going to beat him. And, but this guy, he represents about 145,000 people who are on Medicaid. That's top 10, maybe top 5 in the country. And he voted for that one big ugly bill, largest cut to Medicaid in American history, ripping healthcare away from his own constituents. He did it to reward his billionaire donors. They enacted massive tax breaks for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. And y'all, they made it permanent. And then this malignant clown wants to step to me with a 1-year extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits for working class Americans. I mean, the nerve of these people, the nerve. And I think we're just going to continue, as we've been, to just call them out for the frauds that they are.
Yeah, and blaming it on the Democrats, it really does. That takes some balls. I mean, I don't think he has many, but honestly, like, to say that this is your fault when they're the ones who aren't even in DC right now. They're not even in session. They're on vacation. And they've been on vacation. I mean, even Marjorie Taylor Greene has called out her own leadership for how little they have worked in the last several months. And then they're blaming the Democrats.
That's absolutely right. Marjorie Taylor Greene, God bless her heart. I mean, she is blasting them because she knows in her own district, the Republican healthcare crisis is ripping healthcare away, closing hospitals and nursing homes and community-based health centers, and making healthcare unaffordable because of the refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. They don't want to deal with this. They shut the government down, and they clearly are on the run. None of them are on the same page. They're in complete disarray, and Democrats have been unified because we're fighting for the American people.
I got to say, I really enjoyed the fire that you showed today, and I know that you and your colleagues, your congressional colleagues, are accustomed to the whole decorum thing. And I know I understand there's a whole reason behind the decorum. You're supposed to be, working out issues for the American people in a civilized way. But the stakes are very high right now, and when someone's clearly not trying to hear what you have to say, then they're trying to block out what the American people are trying to communicate. How far are Democrats willing to go to force Republicans to the negotiating table on this issue?
Well, we definitely have made clear over the last several weeks, because we came back into session at the top of September, and at that point we started talking about the need and our willingness to find a bipartisan path forward to fund the government, but that it had to be done in a way that actually improved the health, the safety, and the economic well-being of the American people in terms of lowering the high cost of living in the United States of America, as opposed to costs continuing to go up because of failed Republican policies. So we laid that out very early on throughout September, week after week after week. And then we also said to them very early on, we will not support a partisan Republican spending bill that guts the health care of the American people in the face of this unrelenting assault that they have unleashed on everyday Americans from the very beginning of this presidency. Apparently, they didn't take us seriously, but they know we're serious right now, and we will continue to be serious. And the American people know that we're serious. I mean, what's interesting, in that White House meeting that happened last week, Mike Johnson had the nerve to say healthcare is an extraneous issue. We said, whoa, 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 whoa. Trump sitting right in front of me, Johnson to my right, Vance to my left. Whoa, whoa. Healthcare is not an extraneous issue. It is central to the quality of life of the American people. And that's why Democrats have drawn a firm line in the sand.
So no backing down then?
Yeah, no, listen, I think what we've seen now 6 different times in the Senate Democrats have voted down the partisan Republican spending bill. Now, we want to reopen the government, but we have to do it in a way that actually makes life better for the American people. We're going to continue to stand by hardworking federal employees and civil servants. That is important. We have their back. We know that they're, being forced to work under difficult circumstances, but many of them know that the Trump administration has been after them from day one. Mass firings have been taking place since day one. They went after collective bargaining since day one. And so none of the things that the Trump administration are threatening right now are any different than what they've been doing outside of the context of a government shutdown. Cruelty is the point for this administration. I think this is day 8 of the shutdown, but that means it's day 263 of the chaos that the Trump administration has unleashed on the American people. That's why the guy is so deeply unpopular. That's why they're on the run. That's why Republicans in the House won't even show up. They remain on vacation. And then you got frauds like Mike Lawler trying to pull stunts that don't even work out well for him.
I was going to say Democrats are ahead of the narrative, and it looks like the American people understand 71% of Americans want the ACA tax subsidies to continue. So the narrative is there. Today, I was shocked to find that it's even worse than I thought, because you hear hospitals could close, but the American people, I think, are starting to realize how bad it is, that people are going to die. I spoke with Representative Conway, who's a doctor. He said that he thinks 10,000 people could die very soon if this ends up getting scratched. You have hospitals that are getting overloaded. How do we get this message to the American people that there are so many residual impacts to losing these subsidies that maybe we don't even realize yet?
Yeah, it's such an important point. Now, there are about 24 million people who receive the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And if they disappear, their premiums and copays and deductibles, their healthcare costs are going to dramatically increase, double, triple, in some instances, quadruple. But it's also important for everybody to understand that all of the rest of us are going to be impacted as well. Because if the number of insured people shrinks, those who remain, even if you're on private insurance, your costs are going up. And so everybody is going to get jammed up by the fact that Republicans refuse to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans. And this is the same group of people who just a few months ago in their one big ugly bill caused the country to go into north of $3 trillion worth of debt because they wanted to renew massive tax breaks for their billionaire donor, the wealthiest people amongst us, because they always want to subsidize the lifestyles of the rich and shameless. That's why the nerve of these people to want to come to us with a 1-year extension. And they don't even, I mean, the majority of the Republicans right now, they don't even support that 1-year extension. They basically have said my way or the highway. They want nothing for the American people. And that's why, Democrats are continuing to hold the line.
You mentioned shamelessness, right? Like we have seen in this iteration of the Republican Party, the utter shamelessness with which they carry themselves because they lie. They lie, unabated, unabashed. They just lie. And one of the lies that they're telling right now, to Joe's point about messaging, getting the American people to understand what's really going on, is they're running with this lie. Carolyn Levitt says it just about every day. Mike Johnson spews this lie every day, that this is about the Democrats wanting to give health care to you choose your dehumanizing language du jour to undocumented people in this country, but they use, of course, the language of hate. So can we just dispel, pardon my French, this bullshit, because that's what it is?
Yeah, this fight is about the health care of hardworking American taxpayers. And the go-to for Republicans when they want to jam up Americans is always to try to blame other people. And in this particular instance, suggesting that the healthcare debate is somehow about undocumented immigrants. Of course it's not. Federal law is very clear. Taxpayer dollars cannot be used for Medicaid, for Medicare, for the Affordable Care Act to provide comprehensive health coverage or treatment to undocumented immigrants. That is the law. And there's nothing in the Democratic proposal suggesting that we change this law. We're actually fighting to protect the health care of tens of millions of hardworking American taxpayers who are either going to lose their health care coverage or be forced into medical bankruptcy or effectively have to absorb thousands of dollars in additional costs for their health insurance that's going to require them to shortchange other areas of their life.
I wish there was some kind of way, like you guys could like cut a commercial to explain to the American people in a very simple but quick way, because Americans have a very short attention span, that that it is impossible and illegal to fund to give federal health care to undocumented immigrants. But that's not what I want to ask you about. Congress is supposed to have, everybody as a check and balance against all the different, moving parts of the government. You have the House and you have the Senate and the executive branch and the judicial. But effectively, half of the House has abdicated its responsibility. Uh, Half of the Senate, 2/3 of SCOTUS. So the other day I saw Stephen Miller in an interview with CNN saying that the president has plenary authority. And I had to actually look that up because I hadn't heard that term before, but apparently it means absolute authority. Now, obviously, he shouldn't have it, but if you have half of Congress and 2/3 of the Supreme Court basically throwing their hands up and say, have at it, then what recourse is there? Why should Americans not feel alarmed at, the advance of fascism, seeing military troops in their cities? And what can Democrats do, if anything, to stop it?
Well, we continue to be in a more is more environment because of the unrelenting extremism that has been unleashed on the American people since day one of this presidency. An attack on the economy, an attack on healthcare, an attack on law-abiding immigrant families, an attack on veterans, an attack on hardworking federal employees, an attack on our civil rights, our history, right? The rule of law, the American way of life, and democracy itself. And so there is great reason for people to be alarmed. But the resiliency of the American people at the end of the day, partnering with those powerful voices, of course, that are in the minority on the Supreme Court, but three incredibly brilliant female justices who are speaking truth to power and helping to educate the American people in doing so, even if sometimes they don't always find themselves on the majority side because we have the right-wing conservative justices who have a supermajority. And here in Congress, where you have Republicans basically abdicate their responsibility as a separate and co-equal branch of government, that's been unfortunate. They basically are lapdogs for Donald Trump. All they do is rubber stamp his extreme agenda as opposed to standing up to him, even when they know they're hurting their own constituents. But that's why moments like this are incredibly important. And we're going to have to continue to be unrelenting in the Congress, continue to be unrelenting in the courts, including but not limited to in the Supreme Court, pushing back, pushing back, pushing back every chance we get. But ultimately, I think the American people making it clear this is not normal and this is not acceptable. And that can be done in a variety of different ways, including in the upcoming elections in New Jersey and in Virginia, and with Prop 50 in California, so we can stop Trump from stealing the election by the gerrymandering that they're endeavoring to do in Texas, that California has forcefully responded to. So I do think that there's real hope in the horizon. That election is going to take place in less than a month right now. And there's a real possibility that the American people are going to forcefully say, no, things are going in the wrong direction, and we are going to reverse course. And then we just have to continue to stay on them in the Congress, as we're doing right now, and standing up for the health care of the American people. And we should always remember, I think, as we approach the 250th birthday of this country, during the founding of the Republic, it was once said, I believe, that when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. But when the government fears the people, there is liberty.
That's
There
a
is
good one.
power with the people. And the people are going to need to rise up with righteous indignation in the spirit of those champions like John Lewis and others to push back against the extremism. And together, certainly as House Democrats, we're going to do our part to end this national nightmare.
Can I ask you a question about that? If we could talk strategy, this is really, I mean, we have Brooklyn in the house here, so we don't mess around. Don't tip your hand. But what I was going to say is, how tough can we be against Republicans? Like, for example, right now, we want the subsidies, to remain. We want that out of the budget. At some point, do you say, if you don't open the government by this amount of time, then we also want all the fossil fuel credits. I think in this budget, they want one of the highest tax breaks for oil and gas in history. Those are their donors coming in and say, okay, you're not going to open the government. Then now we want that taken out and make it just even harder and harder until they capitulate. And before I pass it over, I do want to say I thank you, Leader Jeffries, because this is the first no-win scenario I think that Donald Trump has seen, maybe ever. And it's in part due to your leadership. And there's no winning for him. Either he's going to strip healthcare for millions of people, which I hope doesn't happen, or he's going to leave this government shut down. And every American is going to see what a fraud he is. So what's your perspective about strategy and maybe tools in the toolbox for Democrats to show that they mean business?
Yeah, when we sat down as House Democrats during the early weeks of September, as we were preparing, for this showdown around government funding, and knew that the likelihood is from Republicans, we were going to see them try to engage in a continuing government shakedown, right? Because these people have been running the largest pay-to-play scheme in the history of the country since January 20th. So, right, part of what we need to do here, in addition to lowering the high cost of living and fixing our broken healthcare system, is clean up corruption across the board. But in waging this fight around healthcare, I just simply made the point, listen, this is the first amongst equals. There are a lot of issues that we have to press forward on. But this is a gateway into dealing with all of the issues that have to be turned around in terms of the malignant policies that Republicans have been pushing onto the American people and jamming down the throats of the American people. Some of that, of course, relates to their decimation of clean energy jobs. It's one of the reasons why we're seeing electricity bills skyrocket, right, in New Jersey, in New York, all across
No joke.
the country because of their assault on the clean energy economy. That was totally unnecessary. They're in the pockets of the fossil fuel companies. We see that, because of the Trump tariffs, the cost of living is totally out of control. And this is another area where congressional Republicans have abdicated their responsibility of actually being a separate and co-equal branch of government. The tariff authority rests with us in the Congress. Republicans, have basically ceded that to Donald Trump, consistent with, the Stephen Miller theory of he's just going to act like a king until somebody stops him. And, Democrats are committed to stopping him.
And with the last couple of minutes that we have, I wanted to talk to you about what is actually happening. You've talked about it a few times, touched on it, in terms of everything going in the wrong direction right now. Everything Donald Trump promised, he has not delivered, to say the very least. Jobs down, GDP down, costs for everything. I mean, just go to the grocery store. I know he thinks groceries is a newfangled word that he just discovered, but and you compound that with these costs of healthcare going up 300% and more, right? The American people are not stupid, and we know what we're feeling, and you can gaslight people, I think, into believing that things are worse than they are, but I do not believe you can gaslight people into making them think things are better than they are when you can't afford groceries, when you're forced with choosing between paying your electric bill and paying your doctor bill, right? Like this is the thing. And while they're telling us to accept less, to pay more for things, he is still going ahead and building himself a $200 million ballroom that none of us are going to get to dance in, and none of us are going to get to dine in. And for me, I think the calculus here is that they think that we're stupid. And even people I know voted for Donald Trump I've heard them muttering like things are more expensive. He said things were going to be less expensive. When does all the less expensive stuff start? So just with this last minute or two left, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's very important. And I think the way I've assessed the whole situation is that Donald Trump and the Republicans spent the campaign last year lying to the American people in two critical ways that we're now seeing in its entirety during his presidency. One, they repeatedly said they were going to drive down the high cost of living. In fact, Donald Trump said costs were going to go down on day one.
Hmm.
That's what they said they were going to do. The other thing that they lied to the American people about is they said they know nothing about Project 2025, acted like it didn't exist. That was last year. They come to power, and we see the exact opposite. It's a 180-degree turn in both areas. They do nothing to lower the high cost of living. In fact, costs are going up, not down. Trump tariffs are raising costs on by thousands of dollars per year on millions of Americans. Grocery costs up, cost of goods up, electricity bills up, rent up, housing costs up, healthcare prices about to skyrocket out of control. Like America was already too expensive and it's getting worse because of failed Republican policies. While at the same time, what they are doing is implementing every day of the week the most malignant parts of Project 2025, which they lied about in 2024. And so these people have zero credibility. It's a failed administration. They think the American people are dumb. The American people are not. They know that things are heading in the wrong direction. They know that the country is on the wrong track. And I believe they will hold Republicans responsible for their lies and for their failures to improve their quality of life.
Well, thank you very much, Leader Jeffries. I know we need to let you go, so we will wrap with that. Thank you very much to Joe Gallina, called Activism, my friend Brooklyn, Dad Defiant, Majid Padelin. Thank you very much, and thank you for staying in this fight and for bringing a little Brooklyn today. We love seeing that. So thank you, everybody, and that concludes this episode of The Siren. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, and go Yankees.
Let's go! Let's go!